Okay, so welcome to today's webinar. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. This is the second webinar in our lockdown learning series. If you missed the last one, there's a link at the end, a URL that you can go to go and access the recording of the first one. But that was on RFM, recency, frequency, and monetary value segmentation. Today, we're going to talk about winning marketing strategies in wholesale and distribution. So following on from some of that and really taking a step back to make sure we've got our strategy right before in the next webinar, we move on to talking about marketing execution. So just to introduce ourselves, first of all, lots of you will know me. I'm Andy, I'm the CEO at Prospect and I'm very pleased today to welcome Jess, who actually, even if you haven't heard from her, she organises and her team organises all of the webinars that you've attended. So welcome, Jess.
Hi, everyone.
And Jess is here because she's actually qualified to give you this information. Unlike me, Jess has got a marketing degree. So we'll be hearing from Jess shortly. But before I hand over to Jess, I just want to kind of set the scene and make sure that we all know what we're trying to achieve when we talk about marketing strategy rather than marketing execution. So if I asked 100 people on this webinar what marketing is, I'm absolutely certain I'd get 100 different answers. Marketing is a really big subject and means a lot of things and different things to different people. But one of the things that I've learned over the years is that it really is essential to understand that there's two really different things, both called marketing, that all too often get bundled together. And usually, particularly in SMEs where everybody's busy, that ends up with the most important one of the two actually being missed and underplayed. One is a fundamental set of questions that are the same in every business that we run, and the responsibility of the business owner and the board to make decisions on. The other changes much more business to business, sector by sector, and sometimes week by week. And it's the job of the marketing manager, the team, or the department to execute upon those fundamental questions that have been answered by the owner and the board. So sometimes that distinction is made by referring to marketing versus marketing communication, but I think that's pretty confusing. Perhaps a better definition is marketing strategy versus marketing tactics. But I think that's a fairly difficult distinction because one person's strategy is another person's tactics and vice versa. So the distinction that I prefer and that we're going to use in this webinar and the following one next week is the distinction between marketing strategy and marketing execution. So if we're talking about marketing execution or marketing communication, we're trying to solve problems like how will we find our audience? How will they find us? What sales channels will we sell through? What communication channels will we use to talk to our customers? What software will work best for running our email marketing and our SEO and monitoring our website and things like that? What will we say in those emails or on those landing pages? What messages will resonate with our audience, that kind of thing. So that's marketing execution and communication that we're going to cover in the next webinar. But one of the things that I've learned over many years in business is that all of this marketing execution is a real uphill battle and really hard work and requires you to work way harder than you should to be successful unless it's already anchored in a really good market strategy. And by market strategy, these are the questions that we should answer when we talk about market strategy. So first of all, the fundamental question for every business: what problem, need, or desire is our business trying to solve in our market? Not what does our business do, not what does it produce, not what products does it have, but what is the problem, need, or desire that we're trying to solve? And we have to answer that first. In the ideal world, we'd answer that before we selected our products or designed our products or started building our products. But and that's why that's the first question. The second question is, who has that need? Can we identify and describe the person who's got that problem, that need, that desire? Because if we can't, we're going to find it really hard to execute any kind of strategy and do any marketing execution to find those people if we don't know who they are. The third question, which is way too often overlooked, is having said that those are the people that have got the need, the third question is, will those people value a solution to that problem enough to pay for it? And how much will they pay? And it might be that there's a set of people that really have got that need, but just won't pay enough. And there might be a separate bunch of people who've got a slightly different need, or not, maybe even not got quite such a need, but can afford to pay and will pay to have that problem taken away. And sometimes that's just, their propensity to pay, nothing else. The fourth question, which you should then answer before we get too carried away, is how big is that audience? Because, if they're prepared to pay a little bit, but the audience is really big, then that's okay. You just need to make sure that you've got scale built into your products and your processes and your organization. Or if there aren't very many of them, but they're prepared to pay a lot, then that's okay as well. But you need to build much more personal service into your processes and your organization. Some other good questions to answer. Are there some existing alternatives and competitors that mean that while that is a big audience, I might not get it all, or I might only get 10% of it? And once we've answered all of those questions, ultimately, does that add up to a viable opportunity? And as I said on the last slide, the two really key points is A, the difference between an uphill struggle and a downhill ride is getting these things right in the first place. Whether you're talking about marketing or sales or making your customers happy through the operations team and the products, all of that is really hard if you don't get these fundamental questions right. And if you do get them right, you can actually do a fairly average job at all of the execution if you've really got the market strategy right. And the second point B, that really is important, and that I've learned a lot, is that success in this market strategy, as well as in marketing execution, is an iterative process, not a lucky one-off guess. You will start a business by asking yourselves these questions, or having just stumbled across an opportunity where there appears to be a good answer to these, and not really thinking about it that much. And there's only a few lucky people that just by magic get that perfect. What most businesses do is have a reasonably good answer, start, find out that they actually didn't have a great answer, pivot a little bit by moving to a slightly different audience, or solving a slightly different need, or actually using exactly the same products and just describing the need slightly differently and positioning the products differently. And that iterative process gets you closer and closer to being on this downhill ride rather than an uphill struggle. So those are the 6 key questions that we need to answer in developing our market strategy. Today, we're really going to focus on the first 3, partly because I'm not sure there's a lot that we can help you with in terms of 4, 5, and 6. Those are questions for you to answer once we've helped you with 1, 2, and 3. So we're going to focus on these first 3. They're also the 3 that perhaps need a revisit during a disruption like COVID. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But it's certainly the case if these questions need to be answered iteratively in good times, in a difficult time with the lockdown and COVID and the uncertainty in all of our markets, it is absolutely essential that we revisit these today and make sure that we've got them right before we go on and do other things. So I mentioned COVID very briefly, and while we're talking about strategy, I think we can't move on without a decent discussion about COVID-19. It is being, and it has been, a disruption to our daily lives over the last few weeks. But when we're talking marketing strategy and market strategy, we need to see COVID-19 not as a bit of a disruption to our daily lives, but as a huge market disruption in all of our markets. There are lots of market disruptions that can occur in different markets. All the time, there's technological innovation causing disruption, behavioral changes, and recession events from time to time lead to market disruption. But COVID-19 has all three classic disruption factors. It's a technology change. Everybody is getting used to new technology at home and at work. And there are plenty of memes abounding about grandmas using Zoom. It's also forcing a massive behavioral change, which maybe at the beginning of lockdown we all thought might last 2 or 3 weeks, but it is now set to extend in some way or another beyond the lockdown. And there is no doubt it is also going to represent a recession. Whether short-lived or with a good bounce back or long-lasting, it's impossible to know at the moment. But it is certain there is going to be a fairly epic international economic impact from COVID-19. And COVID-19 in terms of the medical science is fairly new territory. But when it comes to economics and market disruption, it's not new. There are some new factors, but we have been here before many times and made it through. In terms of the current 2020 disruption, we don't know how much of a market fall or how much loss of confidence there'll be, or how much of a recession it'll be, or how long it'll last. But we do know it will be significant, and from these examples, we can be sure that any recovery will take a year, probably 2, maybe 3, but that things will recover. And in terms of today, more importantly, because we can't do much about any of that other than watch it unfold, more important to us is whether and how we can capitalize on the opportunity that disruption inevitably brings. So I've said there's an opportunity a few times, and apologies for those with any kind of economics degree or economics background who are going to snort a little bit at my oversimplistic example. But let's illustrate what this opportunity really means with a very, very simple example. So the first thing to remember about a downturn or a recession is that it is never equally applied. A recession is never equal. Let's take an example of a 30% average fall in any given market. And let's imagine in that market there are just 2 competitors, each who start with a 50% share of that market. And so this 30% overall disruption applies to the whole market. But company A adjusts well quickly and sees a 20% fall. So they've seen a fall in business of 20%, but they do keep 80% of their business, which is enough to keep them going. Company B fails to adjust and faces a 40% fall, keeping just 60% of their business. And that's what I mean by the average is still a 30% decline, but it is not applied equally. Inevitably, company B, faced with a 40% fall in sales, fails in year 1, either completely goes out of business or sort of falls off the radar. Company A, because they made some quick adjustments and capitalized well initially, and have got ahead of steam and a positive attitude, continue to capitalize on the disruption that's happening, and they take B's remaining business, and in very short order, because B's gone bust, A is already ahead of pre-disruption sales. So the market is still down 30%, but company A's business is up. Then in year 2 and 3, as the market recovers, company A continues to do well, continues to remain positive and work for its customers. And inevitably, with less competition, company A takes a disproportionate share of the regrowth and ends up with more than twice the business they started with when everybody was panicking about the recession. And if that sounds like a fairy tale and great in theory, and oversimplified, the question is, does it really happen? Well, it does. It definitely does. Here's research from Gartner, so a well-trusted research institute, looking at some US listed companies. And here they compare the top 30 post-disruption performers against a control group who were performing similarly well before the disruption event. So at the beginning of this chart, there's actually two disruption events pretty close together. There's the 2000 to 2003 crisis, and then the 2007 to 2009. And you can see that following the 2003 beginning of the recovery, everyone started to win again, but these top performers started to pull away from the control group. And then in 2007, 2009, everybody was hit again. But those who'd already started to do the right things to make their business a bit leaner, to be a bit more positive, to adjust their market offering, then post-disruption, they really pulled away from the others. And the others actually, if you look at that chart, continued a slow decline. Not only did they fail to gain the recovery, they continued to decline. And this is a worthwhile example looking at, because it's entirely possible COVID, if some of the worst predictions are right, will be a worse recession and a worse economic impact than either of those two events. So looking at what happened when two of these were pretty close together, it is actually quite useful, because that's the closest we can get to perhaps the worst case scenario what might happen with COVID. So the important things to remember is that a recession and a market disruption is never applied equally, and there is always an opportunity for some in every disrupted market, whether disrupted for good or for ill. So the immediate question that follows that is what is it that separates those two groups? What is it that those winners did that the losers failed to do? So the simple answer from that research is that those with a clear strategy were able to execute better and faster, and therefore capitalize on the success. But one of the other things that's true, and you'll find this in all kind of marketing theory books and things, is that a clear market strategy is more important than a super strategy. So, some of those big companies who were successful, perhaps spent an absolute fortune on some marketing and some strategy consultants. But, before anybody here puts a call into McKinsey to spend a fortune on marketing strategy, it is way more important to be clear about what your strategy is and stick to it and go for it at that, with whatever your strategy is chosen, and communicate it well. That's much more important than getting the right strategy. There's always more than one winning strategy, more than one way to skin a cat. So that's really my introduction to market strategy. I realize it was a long introduction, but I think those were some important things for us to bear in mind. And in the next webinar, as I say, we'll look at some of the marketing execution. But for the rest of today's session, I'm going to sort of introduce you to Jess, and hopefully some of my introduction will have encouraged you to take this topic seriously. And Jess is going to look at how we can document some of these strategic pillars, so that when we look next time, we can seriously talk about getting our SEO, our pay-per-click, our email marketing right, and pick the right tools. But really, we're going to try and focus on these three questions today. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to Jess, our resident expert on this topic, to explain how to go about deciding on and documenting and then communicating the answers to these first three fundamental questions.
Thanks, Andy. And thanks to everyone today for joining us live, or if you're watching this back. Just to note, I will be sending this recording along with the slides after the session, so you will get the slides as well. So before we kind of get into what ICPs and personas are, let's actually discuss what the differences are first. So an ideal customer profile, or an ICP for short, is a sort of hypothetical description of the type of company that would get the most value or benefits from your products. So think of a company that you already have, one of your customers, that has all of the qualities that would make them the best fit for your products that you sell, and that's your ICP. So typically your ICP will include key things about that hypothetical company, like their size, the industry they operate in, their turnover, things like that. So in contrast, a persona is essentially a stereotype of your typical customer. So it's focusing on specific characteristics, even demographic information like their age, their gender, what their job title is, how old are they, what do they like, what do they dislike, what are their pain points, maybe what challenges do they face in their role on a daily basis, you know, what are their work related goals, their personal goals, and their habits. You know, do they read certain publications? Do they prefer to read things printed or digitally? You know, these sorts of things will help inform your content strategy in terms of, you know, how you lay things out and the placement and things like that. So essentially with the persona, you want to paint a picture of your most common customer, the sort of person that buys your products most often. So although ICPs and personas are clearly different, they are definitely linked. Now, I mean, you're the only person judging yourself here, but if you were being honest, what score would you give yourself if you have a persona and ICP in place? How good are they, if you even have one? I think a good way of knowing what score to give yourself is, you know, if I was coming into your business and you asked me to write some blogs, some blog content for you to improve your SEO, or maybe I was actually building your PPC campaigns in Google Ads, could you confidently send me an up-to-date, effective, useful ICP and persona that would actually help me write really good content? And I think if everybody in this webinar said yes, then likelihood they're lying, because you probably wouldn't be here. So if you have any doubt at all, you should definitely revisit this. And kind of with that in mind, I wanted to show you a few interesting stats, which are all from sort of UK research on B2B marketers actually. And the first one is hopefully there to actually reassure you in that you're not alone. This is a real problem that many marketers in B2B have identified. Yet building a really good ideal customer profile and persona will actually help you engage your prospects at the right time, in the right way, and with the right messaging. So it is really important to get right. And although many said that they have one, but they're not really using it effectively, it's not actually uncommon for B2B marketers not to have one at all and not have a clear ICP or buyer persona in place. And in fact, nearly half in this particular survey said they didn't even have one. And I think even if there's people here, you know, sitting on this, watching it and thinking, well, I've kind of got one in my head, you know, simply having an idea of who your typical customer is not enough. You know, you need to conduct research and document it, and then let that work guide your marketing strategy. And again, there might be some of you who are in very small marketing teams, or maybe you're a one woman, one man band. You still need to ensure that you do this and make sure that the rest of the team, the salespeople, the ops, the customer service are all kind of agreeing with this ICP and persona that you've come up with. So despite the fact that B2B marketers are kind of holding their hands up and going, yeah, I don't really have one, nearly 100% of them say that actually segmentation is vital in improving their conversion rates, which means they really do need these things in place in order for them to be able to properly execute segmentation and deliver high converting marketing campaigns. So it is really important that this sort of stuff is in place and well documented. And just the final stat here is from HubSpot, who said that if only 1 out of 10 people in your target audience need your products, you could be wasting up to 90% of your time and money. Yeah, it's quite a stark figure as to how imperative it is to have a clear picture of exactly who you're targeting so you can spend your resources in the right places only. So now that we've touched on the clear immediate benefits on why ICPs and personas are needed from a marketing perspective, let's just remember that these things aren't just for the benefit of your marketeers. And actually, I think that's one of the most common misconceptions of ICPs and personas. You know, they're marketing terms, marketing tools. People think that's just for the responsibility of the marketer. And actually, that's definitely not the case. So new business, for example, would definitely benefit if they know all this information about your typical customer. It will enable them to really create a more personalized pitch in the sales process. So instead of delivering like a generic sales pitch and just sort of hoping for the best, they're going to know those pain points from the outset and be able to address those challenges. And this means you're going to be generating, you know, good quality conversions. So if the sales team aren't on board with that, you know, we might be generating leads for them that are completely the wrong fit. And they might turn around and say, well, we can't sell to that person, which means you're generating those wrong leads, you know. Or if your after sales say it's difficult to service these sorts of personas, then you won't retain those customers. So by sharing the ICP and persona work that you do, you're giving those teams a chance to speak up before you start generating those inquiries and before your product team start changing your product range and adapting your products to those customers. So making sure everybody in the team is aware of the persona and the ICP is vital. A clear ICP and persona will actually benefit the after sales process too, and the account management team. They'll begin to see a pattern of the types of issues or after sales queries that these customers and businesses have, so they can actually be much more prepared in how they deal with those scenarios. And then critically, they can actually give good customer service because they're seeing the same types of issues come through, because you're getting those sorts of customers the same every time. And your persona work can actually assist in your future product roadmap as well. So if you're bringing out new products, new product lines, that sort of thing can actually be impacted by your ICP and persona work. Because you're going to be targeting the right kind of customer, you're going to be getting honest feedback from those sorts of customers that's actually going to be useful and generally worthwhile implementing. And then you can implement that for your future customers. So it's helping shape your product portfolio. Yeah.
Yes, just before anybody pops up with a question, could you just explain what MPD actually stands for?
New product development. So yeah, if you're developing new products, that's what it stands for. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So all in all, if you're more targeted about, who your products are designed for and attract more of the right type of customer, you're going to make a higher proportion of those customers happier. And then, in turn, you're going to get more 5-star reviews, more people are going to be shouting about your products, and then you're going to be in this cyclical process of getting and attracting more customers. So ICPs and personas are essentially the face of your customers and your prospects, not just for the benefit of the marketing team. And we do practice what we preach. So let's just have a look at what we do at ProspectSoft. So as you can see, high level information about our ICP is sort of plastered all over the website. Actually, we clearly identify the industry we target, and we even go further to highlight pain points and how our solution mitigates these. But it's not just our website. We do this through social media, pay-per-click campaigns, on our partner websites, and all of that. So, it's really important to actually drip feed this through all of your messaging and your media. And then because we're attracting the right kinds of businesses, we're actually getting their feedback, and then we're able to implement that back into the product, and we're really delivering on features that people want. So that is it kind of in practice. And just want to touch on another quick stat here. Although, you should only have one ICP, quite often businesses will have more than one persona. So you may be thinking about your personas now and actually have identified maybe 2 or 3 or maybe even more. And actually we can see from this stat that it's common in the modern buying cycle to have multiple decision makers and influencers in the sales process. So it is really important to understand all of those personas as much as you can, even if you might only be speaking to some of them directly and some of them more indirectly. So just looking at our personas quickly, we're one of those businesses. In fact, we've got identified 2 personas, Neil and Nathan. Some of you might actually have seen Neil on the left in our offices. We've kind of got posters up everywhere about him. But think about your personas. Do you have someone more junior look into your products, and then you get somebody more senior to pass that off and sign that off? Is there a bit more to it than just the one? And it's also worth noting that Neil on the left, although he is still a relevant persona for us, we actually came up with him back in 2014, so 6 years ago now. And although he is relevant, developing a clear ICP definitely was key in the birth of Nathan. So without reviewing that, we would never have come up with Nathan in this way. So the point is, even if you've got a buyer persona, definitely review it. And as your business grows and changes, you will learn more and make those adaptations to it. And also the key point here is to share it company-wide. We have this all over the office. It's not just the responsibility of the marketer to actually use this. It's everybody's responsibility.
Yes. Now that we're in lockdown, I want to know if you've put one of these posters on your wall at home.
Oh, I was going to print it out and have it next to me with all the other branding bits. I might actually do that. So I now want to maybe touch on a customer story that I think will probably resonate with everybody a bit better. Obviously, we're a software company. This customer actually does sell products. So let's just take a look at this real life example. And, bit of a free plug for them, actually. They've got a B2C arm as well as a wholesale distribution arm. And you probably guessed it, they sell pate. So this is Patchwork Pate. Andy, I know that you probably know quite a bit about this customer. I know you've seen them more recently than me. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So actually, I should say these guys are lovely people. And if you want something interesting to eat in lockdown, definitely go and buy some pates from Patchwork Foods. I had the privilege and the pleasure to actually go and visit them a few years ago. But they're just, for this example, it's not really important to know an awful lot about them. What is important is just for us to put our thinking caps on and a bit of imagination and go through an example of what's important, for these people and their customers. So Patchwork are worth talking about because it would be very easy to think that they should have two ICPs because they sell B2C and they sell B2B. But like a lot of SMEs that do some B2C and some B2B, actually, they're typically their most profitable and largest, most scalable bit of their business was actually the B2B. Because to be really successful at B2C, you typically need an enormous budget, to make an impact on a national scale or an international scale. You need an amazing brand and an amazing budget. And whereas to be successful in B2B, you've got much more scalability without having to invest in the infrastructure. You've got much more scalability of marketing and sales because of all those different outlets. So it's pretty common for SMEs to do both, but for B2B to be the larger, more scalable part of their business. And that means that the ICP, there aren't two different ICPs. There is one ICP. There is one ideal customer. It's called the ideal customer rather than the one of our many customer profiles. It is the ideal customer profile because who is the ideal buyer? Who is the person, the company that we can target that's going to scale and spend the most money with us? And obviously, I'm sure they love their B2C customers and some of it's fairly high margin, but in the B2B sales, they've got customers who are buying from them a decent amount of stock every single week or every single month, and they can just keep repeating that business and scale the business. So their ideal customer profile would be a B2B customer. And again, the actual reality of their ICP is not important, particularly. It could be that if you were trying to promote pates, you might try and sell them to restaurants, or you might try and sell them to delicatessens, or local shops or supermarkets. And of course, you might actually try and sell to all four of those, but you still have to decide which one of those is your ideal customer profile. And then once you've decided that, you really have to get deep into what exactly do they look like, and you can imagine that, let's say, for example, that Patchwork decide that their ideal customer profile is a delicatessen. And without banging on about COVID, if it had previously been restaurants, they might now be deciding that it's takeaways or delicatessens. So let's imagine they either historically or right now decide that it's delicatessens. What does that delicatessen look like? How big is it? Is it a chain? Is it an individual? And by defining an ICP, it doesn't mean to say that you're going to turn down orders from people who don't meet your profile perfectly, but it's still important to be really precise about that ICP. Who are they? What do they do? What do they look like? How big are they? Are they a chain? Are they individuals? Are they on the high street? Are they in a village? Just really define exactly what the ideal customer profile looks like. And then, of course, when we get into the personas, there's probably more than one persona. So actually, the person who walks into the delicatessen store and buys your pate from the delicatessen is one of your ICPs. They are one of the personas. They are one of the people involved in that buying decision, because if they don't like it and they don't like the packaging and they don't buy it at the delicatessen, then the delicatessen will stop buying stock from you. So the end consumer would be, perhaps the person who works behind the till and does the serving would be, because if they aren't considering they don't like you, then they won't promote your product. But perhaps the most important persona would then, if your target audience is individual delicatessens, the most important persona of the lot would be the delicatessen owner. And we need to know, what are their passions, what are their interests. Clearly, they're going to be people who love food, but do they use Facebook? Do they use LinkedIn? How do they go about finding new products to stock? What do they judge their products by? What are their challenges? Are their challenges food going off before its sell-by date? Are there challenges that they don't have enough storage, or they don't have enough refrigerated storage or freezer storage, or whatever those problems are? And we need to, as a minimum, understand their problems and sympathize with them. But ideally, even go about finding ways to solve their specific problems as human beings, not just as businesses. So hopefully that example is one that you can imagine and work with. And I'm going to give you another one now that I'm not going to go into. Jess and I were talking about this before as we were putting the presentation together. And I think one of the things that's really important is that you try and get good at identifying ICPs and personas, perhaps before you try and do it for yourselves. I think when you try and come up with your own ICP and your own persona, you always bring a lot of baggage to it. You bring your history to it, your successes and your scars, which are useful to use, but I think can make it quite hard to be objective and investigative about and imaginative about your ICP and your persona. So what we'd actually like you to do is just to take this example or any other example you want to come up with, and as a team after this webinar, have a go at just imagining this business. So this is one of our customers, Cycling Sports Group. They actually don't sell B2C, they only sell B2B to bike shops and the like. But have a go at imagining and describing their ICP and why they should choose that ICP, and how big is that market, and would they be prepared to spend the money. And then think about the personas for those businesses and who they need to make sure they appeal to. So just have a go at that and let your imagination run wild. Maybe find another couple of examples for yourselves, and have a good go at some theoretical ones. Have some fun, be silly if you like, but get into the habit of really drilling into exactly who those personas are. Give them a name, whether it be Neil Watts or Bill or Fred or Wendy, whoever you like. Give them a name and really describe them and their likes and their dislikes. Okay, Jess, back to you.
Thanks, Andy. So now you kind of know why they're important and what they look like. How do you actually go about building your own? So firstly, you need to do a lot of research. And there are kind of three main places that we'd recommend you start. And it's kind of easy to remember them by thinking of them as the three C's. So funny enough, one good place to start to learn more about your customers is by asking your existing customers. Now, there are a few elements to this. Firstly, you could think about your long-term customers, those that regularly buy your products, your sort of champion customers. And these customers are usually going to be your advocates. They're more likely to give you feedback into sort of what's working, what's not working. And you can quite easily find out what their challenges are and their motivators are and why they would recommend your products over competitors. You can just pick up the phone, talk to them, send out an email marketing campaign with a survey link possibly, and maybe even offer an incentive for just completing the form to encourage more respondents. You could even just, do a video call with them, whatever works at the moment, a kind of a personable approach. And you just basically want to find out what their motivators are, their challenges, and their kind of favorite aspects of your product. But as well as your long-term customers, think about those that maybe aren't such a great fit, those that might be leaving you, those that are causing more hard work than they're putting money in the bank. Those customers can identify characteristics that your team really shouldn't be targeting, so you can learn from your mistakes. But it's also worth speaking to those customers that you're just about to onboard, or those new customers. They've just started buying from you. It's going to be very fresh in their minds as to why they purchased with you. The second one is your customer facing teams. So instead of just making assumptions, the marketing team doesn't know everything. They're going to need to speak to other people in the business. So think about your sales team and your account managers, the ops team, because they'll probably know more than you think on this sort of stuff. They're the ones speaking to your customers and your prospects day in and day out. What convinced their prospects to buy, and what could have been improved in that process. So they can definitely offer some very good insight. And the third one, of course, we had to link it to CRM, but it is actually very true. Your CRM holds so much critical information about your customers, which will be useful in the ICP and the persona building process. So, start by analyzing, the contact information, industry codes, role codes, look at notes in the system, look at problems that you might have in the system, or issues, ticket issues. These could maybe even uncover some of those pain points that we mentioned earlier. You'll probably have a sales pipeline, an opportunity pipeline, and if you're using prospect CRM, you definitely will. But most CRMs will have that, and these could uncover reasons why they purchased as well, and maybe what their kind of key objections were in the sales process. So definitely look at your CRM. That is vital. And normally there are just those three that I've mentioned, but at the moment there is a fourth, which we did mention earlier, Andy mentioned, which is whether we like it or not, coronavirus or COVID-19. And so when things do start to return to normal, or maybe even now, think about if there is a slightly different ICP or persona that you should be tackling, maybe in the short term or the medium term or even the long term. Normally I'd just go and say, find out who your best customers are using 1, 2, and 3. But these might actually not necessarily be the same as your target audience during COVID-19 or even after it. So it's definitely something to think about. And hopefully things return to normal very quickly, and that's obviously what we're hoping, but they may not in your industry. If you're selling PPE, for example, you might suddenly have a new champion customer of dentists that you didn't have before. So this could present, an opportunistic ICP that you could go after, or maybe even might be a longer term adjustment to your core marketing strategy. So it's definitely worth looking at that. You could be selling packaging, for example. Maybe you have to move away from selling it to toy stores and start selling it to takeaways. So these things could be temporary changes or maybe more permanent strategic shifts. But it is worth definitely thinking about that fourth one there. And obviously we can't tell you what your best ICP or your persona should be, but it is very important that you're clear about what they are. And that is a real factor for success here. So I've mentioned throughout that it's vitally important that you know who you're speaking to when you're building your ICP and your persona work. And this is kind of where RFM segmentation comes in, which is something Andy mentioned at the start of the webinar. Again, a bit of a shameless plug, only about 30 seconds, but Prospect CRM does automatically calculate recency, frequency, and monetary value on every single customer daily. So this means you're able to see which customers are your champions, which ones are slipping away, which ones are your loyal customers. And this enables you to know, who am I going to go and speak to when I want to build my ICP and my persona work. And it is also actually worth noting that with our CRM prospects, you can also look at historical information like, who were your champions a year ago and not now, for example. So it does take that into account. So there are plenty of free tools out there and templates, which you might have already had a quick look at to get you started, but many of them are pretty easy, friendly, easy to use. But we will include some in the follow-up email that we think are particularly good. But these are definitely ways you can actually slot in your persona and ICP work once you've done some of the research. So I'll definitely follow in the follow-up email. I'll put some of those links in as well. And I'm going to pass back over to Andy just to finish up the webinar.
Thanks, Jess. That was excellent. Thank you very much for all of that. And thank you to all of you for attending this afternoon. I hope you found some of that useful. As I said earlier, the next session in our lockdown learning series, number 3, is really looking at taking these ICPs and these personas forward into successful marketing execution. So, we'll be looking at email marketing, pay-per-click, SEO, and some of the tools and decisions around execution and doing that well. But as you'll see when we get into that, if you don't have clear ICPs and personas, it's actually very hard to do really good execution without that. And I've seen many marketing teams or marketing people, particularly in SMEs, trying to do really good execution without having had a very clear steer on the ICP and the persona, and that always makes it, as I said at the beginning, an uphill battle. So that's the next one, and it's on Tuesday, 20th of April at 3 o'clock. If you missed the first one, or if you want to know about all the other upcoming ones, then head over to prospectsoft.com/webinars, where you can book onto all of them if you want to, or you can request the recording of the previous ones. So finally, again, thank you very much for attending. Stay safe, and hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you very much.